Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spoonful podcast. I am one of your hosts, Mario Paraquadio. Joining me, as always, is my baby boy, Emmett Watkins Jr.
That's right. I am indeed Tyrese from that movie from like 2002. Shout out to that movie if you watch BET at all
All
in the early
right.
2000s.
20 seconds in, and Emmett already pulling out weird movies. Let's go.
Shout out John
Joining,
Tingle.
yeah, there you go. Joining us today is a very, very special guest. You might know him as the monster slash genius who created the kind of funny Avatar in review intro, Mr. Cameron Kennedy.
Hey, nice to finally talk to you guys.
I know. It's
Indeed.
it's it's one of those crazy things where, and I'm sure Emmett would agree. I've interacted with you, Cameron, for like years. Like we've interacted with each other.
Yeah,
We've talked a ton on Twitter. Is this the first time we actually like talk face to face?
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure if we weren't like already on Discord together, then I don't think there's
Yeah,
any
I
time that
don't,
would have come
Yeah.
up.
I really don't think so.
Same here.
And it's funny because it's like Cameron, someone I've known for years and I've talked about for years, and
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, hey,
I mean, it must have been like at least like what 4 or 5 years of like being mutuals with you guys on Twitter, right?
for sure, at least, yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
definitely. Yeah, I've been seeing you around forever. You're the god of the kind of funny intros and all that stuff. So it's like, yeah, we've always been friendly. And plus, fucked around and did that prom thing a couple years ago. So the connections have been made, but it's time to actually discuss things. So, hi, how's it going?
Good. Yeah. No, I've because that's another one. I've never been to one of Kind of Funny's events,
I know,
so I've
That's true.
that's
yeah
crazy.
never met anyone. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool getting to do any
We'll
of this kind
we'll
of
we'll
stuff.
meet one day. We're happy to have you on the show. Emmett and I always talk about how we technically met at Kind of Funny Prom, but it was like in passing, and
Oh yeah.
we became homies way after the fact. So
Right.
it almost feels like we've never seen each other in person. Because when we did, we
Right.
just had seen each other on Twitter, and we always talk
Yeah.
about the first time we see each other, it's gonna be like a good ass moment. But that's internet friends for you, man.
Yeah, I didn't even think
Bro.
about that. You guys started this like post COVID starting.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, there hasn't been anything.
our friendship really blossomed like playing Apex and like us like streaming Apex together, and that was like already pandemic. That's like way
Yeah.
after prom, so ain't that fun? Ain't that fun?
Yeah, cool.
Well,
Gotta love the world.
if you lovely people that we haven't met but we've probably interacted for years and years on the internet. If you didn't know, this is the Spoonful Podcast. It goes live every other Tuesday on youtube.com/at Spoonful Vids. It's a show where Emmett and I, and sometimes a guest, talk just about anything we want. We spoon feed you a topic.
I like how you caught yourself.
I
I
did.
saw
I
that.
caught myself. I'll give
Yeah,
myself points for that. So today we're just kind of like it started off right when we were talking about what to discuss. It started off as like, let's talk about the Last of Us HBO show, since it's one of, if not the hottest thing in the video game world right now, right? Everybody's talking about it. Recently, a few days ago, they announced season 2 is coming out and it's going to cover part 2. And there was also that report about a Last of Us Part 3 and all that. So we're in a big, heavy Last of Us kick, and that has sort of snowballed into being into a big heavy video game, like prestige video game adaptation kick. I've seen people on Twitter talk about the this is going to probably become a new trend now, with The
Yeah.
Last of Us being what it is and the hit it is. I think we're going to see a lot of like really excellent TV, and we just kind of want to talk about all of it, about video game TV and The Last of Us and all that. You guys have any specific thoughts that jump to mind to start the show with?
For, I say we start first off with the thing that kind of started this topic, the Last of Us TV show itself. Now I'll speak for myself. I have only seen the first episode
Same.
because I'm at this point I'm trying to watch it with the girlfriend, and we only see each other like once a week. So
Right.
last
Fair.
week we did not make time to watch the show. So yeah, I know there's some controversial stuff happening in the second episode, but so far, based off that first episode, I really, really like the show. I think it's gonna be great. I'm excited to watch more of it. I was surprised by how unexcited I was to experience this story without playing it.
Mm,
Right.
That is like
fair.
my main takeaway. I'm still there for all of it, especially since she's never played the game, so I'm getting to experience it all through her eyes. But it is definitely. I was a little bit surprised by that, so I wanted to know what y'all thought about the show overall, because that's kind of my initial feelings on it.
I mean, I know for me, it's I'm just excited at the idea of similar situation of just more so than getting to experience it again, get to talk to people
Mm,
about this story that we've been in a small bubble discussing for a decade now. But it's been shut off from everything. I think people have this idea that it's probably similar to things like The Walking Dead or whatever existing TV shows and movie kind of similar vibe, like touchstones they have, that it's difficult to like give context for how this thing is different, how it's important. And it's nice to be able to, it almost feels like everyone's finally getting the chance to share it more so than see this thing that we've been anticipating. Cause like it's very, so far, uh, faithful in a
yeah.
lot of ways to the existing version.
What
Very
I
true.
really appreciate about it is that yeah, Cameron, you're totally right. It is super faithful. Like it genuinely feels like The Last of Us. I'm sure you guys have both experienced it. I've been mouthing at the lines that I know are
Right.
coming, and they say the
Yeah.
line the way that I remember them saying the line. And listen, I'm a Last of Us freak, right? Like my
Right.
second tattoo ever is a Firefly tattoo. As soon as part two came out, I got the moth tattooed. And funny enough, out of my tattoos that get recognized out in the public, the Firefly is one of them. Anybody who's in the video game space immediately recognizes the Firefly, and usually it's a good conversation starter. And I recently realized that suddenly this tattoo is going to be extremely,
Everywhere.
yeah, it's gonna
Hmm.
be everywhere. Everybody's gonna know what it is. It's gonna become such a, it's a different thing, right? This was like sort of a sign of, oh, you're a gamer, we're gamers, we get it. And
Yeah.
now it's the same thing as if I had like a Harry Potter tattoo or something along those lines,
Right.
right? It's
That
part of
might
pop
mean different
culture.
Maybe
things now.
Well, yeah,
maybe a
maybe
bit
not,
better off, but
maybe not in
I get the point
2023.
you're making.
Fair,
Yeah,
fair.
I get the
Let's
point
say
you're
Game of
making.
Thrones then. Let's stick with
Yeah.
HBO.
Well,
Fair
shit.
enough.
Actually, well, nah. I'll let you have Game of Thrones.
Fair enough on that. But yeah, the thing that I really love about this show is it is faithful, and they've expanded on it in ways that feel true to the universe. The things that they've changed to me make sense, and I understand them, and I appreciate them, and I enjoy them for what they are. Uh, in episode two, Emmett, you're gonna see one of the more noticeable changes, and I'm sure you saw leading up to the release that they were talking about how there wasn't going to be any spores in the show. That's not one of the
Yeah.
ways that it gets transmitted. What they replaced spores with, I really enjoy. Seems believable, and I think it suits a TV show better, whereas the spores suit the games better. But yeah, dude, the experience, the thing, the word I keep coming back to at the end of episode one and at the end of episode two is surreal. To me, it's surreal that this is happening with the level of quality that it is happening with, how excellent the performances are, how much attention to detail there is, how I'm so glad Neil Druckmann is a part of this, because you can tell that him and Craig Mazin are working together to make this be
More like
truthful.
a Mason, am I right?
Hey, but I love it, dude. Every episode I'm just completely in awe. We're recording this on Sunday, the Sunday that episode 3 is set to come out, and from people that I've interacted with that have already seen the season, they're saying that episode 3 is excellent. That everything with Bill and Frank is supposed to be really, really good. And from my
Mm.
understanding of it, episode 3, a lot of it is not the game. It's a lot of it is
yeah.
expanded.
Which is, I think is interesting that the one that seems to be getting the most discussion when the season reviews came out was episode 3, and everything we're seeing so far and like the previews for it aren't at all from the game.
Totally.
And so it is interesting, just this, it is a little bit of like, okay, we're getting to experience it for the first time through other people, but this is something that will be completely new for us
Totally.
as well. So it's interesting that that's the one that's getting the most praise, just because it's, who knows, right? Like something
100%.
wholly original being maybe even better than what was there before is kind of an exciting
Totally.
idea.
No, and the thing that I appreciate in why The Last of Us story works so well and it's so easily adaptable to something like TV is obviously on TV you can have things like what we're going to see with Bill, where Joel and Ellie aren't there for a portion of whatever they're going to tell. You can tell the story from different perspectives, and you can't do that as well on a video game. And we've already seen examples of them doing those stories from different perspective that add to the original story. Like when Ellie in episode 1, when she's chained to the room, and you see those conversations with Marlene and Marlene's conversations with the Fireflies, they expand on what we already know, and they're adding little different hints and bits that us as people who have already experienced the story, we appreciate the little breadcrumbs that they're giving us. And for Bill and Frank, the fact that Frank is a real character is super exciting, and B, it seems from the previews like Bill, sorry, is a pretty different character, and I'm
Yeah.
really interested to see his, like, Nick Offerman's take, right? Because Bill in the games is sort of this crazy, wacky guy, a bit of a mess, very, very control freak sort of person. Whereas on the show, at least from the previews, it seems like it's a lot. He's a very calm, subdued, organized sort of guy.
A lot more pleasant.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just excited,
I
man.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that I'm concerned with, and maybe this is a concern I shouldn't even have because people are saying really positive things about episode 3, is for those of you who played The Last of Us, you know how, Bill and Frank's relationship ends up
Yeah.
at the end of everything.
Right.
So the fact that Frank is still around in this one, I what I have in my head is, okay, is Joel and Ellie gonna come across them earlier in that relationship and it still has the same destination, or is that a different destination entirely? And considering it's one of those things where, like, because The Last of Us 2 exists, and there's positive queer portrayals in The Last of Us Part 2, that happening in The Last of Us Part 1 is dulled a little bit. It, like, doesn't sting as much, but I'm a little bit worried about, like, are we gonna see what happens to Frank in this
Right.
episode, or
Yeah.
is that like something unsaid? Is it gonna be a bad ending for Bill in that respect? And that just feels like it's gonna hurt a little bit, and just, it feels like it's not gonna feel quite right if that is the case. But with all the positive talk of this episode, I'm hoping that even if that is the case, that it's done tastefully in some way where it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like, a betrayal or something.
Yeah, I've had the same thoughts a little bit because it was also 10 years ago. The
Right.
fact that this video game character, like as pathetic as it is, that a video game character period was gay, felt like, oh, finally something a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is a very dark ending for that relationship.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, diving deeper into it and focusing on it more, does it just kind of, yeah, is it just going to sting people more than it's going to feel like it's fleshing this character out?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because when you look at the game, and sort of the steps that you take on the game, that moment where you find Frank is one of the first. It's not to say that the game hasn't been brutal up until then, but it's one of those first, like, real emotional gut punches of, like, man, this world is so bleak and everything just fucking sucks, and it's right, that's the vibe of The
Yeah.
Last of Us. It's not a happy vibe,
Absolutely.
and that's what interests me about how they're going to tackle it here, because we've already had moments to show how bleak this world is, but I think this is one of the first times, other than Tess, I guess, also counts, but where it's characters that are directly impacting Joel and Ellie's story. Our friend, another Twitter mutual, Matt Rohrbeck, he already got to see the whole ep season, and his podcast, they've been doing the cast of us, and it's been an excellent podcast that they release as soon as the episode ends. So shout out to them
Yep.
for that. Uh,
Gee Willik.
he's told me on Twitter multiple times that like what happens with Bill and Frank is excellent. He's been a huge champion of that. I trust him. I'm excited for it. And just thinking about how they've moved through the story of the game, right? We're already gonna be at Bill and Frank's, which leads into Pittsburgh, which leads into Sam and Henry, and leads into Tommy, and so we're going, man. We're going, and it's so exciting and it's so excellent to see been done this well. And I'm already thinking about season two, as I know a lot of people have. And there's been those reports that the Naughty Dog account, I think the HBO account, and Craig Mazin followed a specific actress who very much so fits the build for
Yeah.
Abby.
What's her name? I'm gonna look her up.
Oh, dude,
I didn't know this.
she got guns, bro. Let me
I
tell
don't
you.
I'm not sure what her name is, but I have been thinking like they probably will seed some of that part two stuff in a little bit early, right? Because I feel like maybe even something has happened already with that. I don't quite remember. Or I might even just be thinking of the Left Behind stuff that has been
Like,
hinted
Yeah.
at already
yeah,
a little bit. But I mean, the Doctor is going to be cast for this season, right?
totally.
Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they film stuff maybe for that part two already, like, have those things in mind. Um, yeah, and I guess that is another one with like leading into a part two adaptation. Like, how much of these flashback kind of things have they already been planning out now, right? Like,
Right.
Hmm,
It's
because
great
it's
point.
yeah, and someone like Abby, right, who goes through such a physical transformation in terms of both time and like her build, right? Like she changes physically as a person because of her circumstances. Like, it's interesting if they set that up now, right?
100%, and it's that thing of I don't know if you guys played the Last of Us Part One, the remake, but obviously they update a few things to kind of line up with Part Two better, and the most noticeable one is the hospital scene where first you line up that hallway with the Firefly logo. It looks identical to the one in Part Two, and then when you shoot the doctor, spoilers, Abby's dad.
It's a white guy and not the brown guy from
Yeah,
the first game.
it's the
Yeah.
same, it's the same character model. Like it's exactly the same
Hmm.
character model, and it's those little things of, they went back and revised it so that they line up better with the show. To your point, Cameron, they already have all that prepped, right? They already know where they're gonna go with part two, and I'm sure they're gonna, obviously like they've done here, they're gonna do some changes and they're gonna expand some things. But it's exciting to see that it's treading well so far. I have full faith in the team. I don't expect them to drop the ball with any of the big moments in The Last of Us, and I don't expect them to drop the ball with part two. Uh, the first thing I said when they announced is, man, people, like the general audience is not prepared for fucking part two,
Oh my
man.
god.
Yeah.
Oh,
I kind
Oh my
of
goodness.
wonder if like I was talking to a friend who she didn't have like she had like Nintendo consoles but nothing PlayStation for years, and so it was just this last year that she's finally like played through The Last of Us Part 1, Part 2 and like all these more story heavy kind of games. And she brought up just like how will people react, or like are people used to something like season 1 of Game of Thrones? Like changing
hmm.
up with an ensemble cast, like
Right.
how like or even people like they're just the different twists in terms of like character I don't even like who you side with a little bit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
um Maybe a general audience is more prepared for that than people who are into video games for gameplay
Mm.
and they're coming at this for an action purpose rather than solely like seeing what this team wants to tell story wise. Like maybe they'll be more receptive, but it could also just be all of that over again, right? Of like,
Yeah. It's been interesting to see the people on Twitter like already kind of being like, "Oh, I'm not ready for all that part 2 discourse again." But I kind of lean with what you were starting with, Cam, where I think the general public, they've watched Game of Thrones, and that's one of the reasons why I think HBO is perfect for The Last of Us, cuz we know they're not going to hold any punches, right? As
Yeah.
soon as you see a golf club, you know what's about to happen, and they're not shying away
Four.
from that. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like people might just accept it for what it is, right? Like you'll have people be sad that Daddy Pedro is gone, but I have a little bit of faith that on a TV show format, just being that prestige HBO brutal stuff, no character is ever safe kind of moment, I don't expect it to be the uproar than the gamers caused, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is also like the gamers found out about that event through a leak. So
Right,
there
the
was
leak
no
fucking
context when it happened.
really sucked the air out of that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
discussion for sure.
Yeah. That's really what poisoned the discourse first
Yeah.
off. But
And
I think,
and also
oh, yeah,
to
go ahead.
point out, and I'm sorry to cut you off,
Oh,
and
no, you're good.
also the leaks made people angry, and as very specific sector of the internet and gamers, when they thought Abby was trans, and that was a huge part
Right.
of the backlash that Naughty Dog was getting, right? And obviously there is a trans character in part two, but it wasn't Abby, and it was just such a fucking shitstorm of stupid angry gamers online that kind of, I think, muddied the beginning of Last of Us Part Two. I really wonder what that game's release looks like without those leaks. I wonder if it's
Yeah.
the same.
It's very also like this is coming from a complete place of ignorance because like these people have always been out there, but I didn't realize, I think, the extent of open, just straight up bigotry that was out there before
Fuck.
these leaks happened, because it was across the board of like,
It was awful.
I was seeing drawings and stuff that I couldn't tell what it was based on, like caricatures of, but it was just so much hatred mixed in
Yeah.
and directed at different places across the board, even with like Ellie's sexuality. That was just like, it was shocking. And it was just kind of like, at the same time, it's also, these people were a lost cause to begin with.
100%.
If that's in them, then
Yeah.
this was never going to be for them, and it never should have been, because nothing should have been, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, maybe the worst of it is out already, but it is. I do wonder, yeah, like maybe it would have been even bigger though, if
Maybe if caught people by surprise while they're playing, it's one
Yeah.
of those things that we'll never quite know, right? But
I think it would have been a situation where if you find out what happened through a message on Discord or something, you have no further context to read. You can
Yeah.
have your opinion and you go off. But if that happened in the game, I'm sure a lot of people would have been like, well, I spent my $70. I'm mad, but I have to see what the fuck happens next.
right.
Yeah.
So I think there'd be a lot less vitriol because people would just give the game a chance to explain itself instead
Right.
of it not having that chance
Totally.
a month or two ahead of time.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that leak always fucking just hurt my heart so much for Naughty Dog and the whole team. Like that's gotta just suck so much. And
Yeah.
dude, even Neil, I saw so many like anti-Semitic things against Neil, to Cam's point, where it's like
Yeah.
they're just bigotry on any single thing that they could find. They were throwing it at everybody at Naughty Dog. It's just
And
the
even
worst.
things that were made up of like, the one I was thinking about the other day is like there's a sex scene later in the game with Abby, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And people claiming that the person she's with is a surrogate for Neil, like just
I know.
weird
Yeah.
conspiracies
I
people
know.
came up with of
Oh my
like,
god, you're right about that.
yeah, yikes. I
Yeah.
don't think we'll have any of that at
No,
least
I
this
don't
time.
think
Like,
so. I don't think so.
so
That is true.
I think
Yeah,
we'll be
I think
spared all
people-
that bullshit.
Yeah, I will say I think people are, because I think people are going to be more receptive to the actual plot points of The Last of Us Part 2, especially considering, if you consider the pacing of it, yes,
Yeah.
Joel's fate is sealed pretty early on, but right
Yeah.
after that, you get the very slow, like, just Ellie and Dina, very sweet moments there before things get back to brutality. I think they can pace it out right to where it's not going to sting as much. The thing I'm more concerned about is Last of Us Part 2. So much of that gameplay was reinforcing the brutality of everything, where it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
oh, Brian, you died. Oh my God, the son of my child. Or
Totally. I think I have faith in the team, and I know you haven't seen episode 2, Emmett, so I don't want to like totally talk much about episode 2, but in episode 2, I think they did one of the best, probably honestly the best gameplay to action
Yeah.
in a movie or in a series translation I've ever seen. Um,
Hmm.
the scene with and you it's in the trailers and everything. They encounter clickers for the first time in episode 2, and the
Understand.
that entire scene with clickers had me feeling the exact same emotions that I felt while playing the game, and I thought it was excellently done. There's a really great scene that I feel like only gamers, and I hate saying the term gamers, but only like people who play video games really appreciate, and that's like the reloading scene.
Yeah.
How often do you see like a reloading scene in action? It's just focusing on the reload,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah,
done so
John Wick.
well.
That's about it.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, man, you can tell that this comes from a video game, and it's done excellently, and it adds to the tension and the drama. So that's why I think part two could be well done. I think they can still instill those things we felt while we were playing the game, that brutality of the game, in in a serious format, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, yeah. I think The Last of Us Part Two is going to be good, even if the gameplay. I'm less worried about it like not translating into film. I'm more worried about like the point of the gameplay being
Right.
so brutal.
Yeah.
How is
Right.
that going to come off in a non-gameplay medium where instead of it being, oh, this violence is kind of fun because it's a video game, it's just grindhouse, brutal murder, brutal murder. How are we going to be able to look at Ellie after this? How are they going to balance that tonally? So I think Craig Mason's up to the task because even before The Last of Us, I was a big fan of Chernobyl. So like
Totally.
I believe in him. Of course, I believe in Naughty Dog, Neil Druckmann, all those folks. Haley Gross hopefully is involved with season
I
two and
Yeah.
three.
I think she might
So
be because I saw her. She was one of the first people that I saw that quote tweeted like the announcement, and she did like a little thing. So knowing that Neil's part of it and Neil's so involved in it, I I would assume that she would be involved in it as well, since she's such a big part of part two. Uh, and one of the last things I want to say before I give it back to you guys is back to what I think Cameron was talking about, how they're already planting a few seeds for what part two is. That scene at the end of the first episode of the pilot episode when Joel is beating the shit out of that guy, and they focus in
mm,
on Ellie's face, and she looks like excited. She looks happy. She's that you they planted those seeds that Ellie has a lot of brutality in her, right? And those seeds weren't planted in the first game. Or they were, but not to this extent where already
Yeah.
you're seeing that she's not phased by that brutal violence, and you could see that she could be capable of bad stuff. So I love that they're
mm,
already doing these things with that in mind.
Yeah, it's because I think they're playing a little bit with clearly Joel the last 20 years at this point has dealt with his emotions through violence, right? And just like being destructive, right? And he hasn't really had anything to do that for. Now Ellie's coming into the picture, and that's going to motivate a little bit more of his reasoning for doing this than his daughter 20 years beforehand, right? Whereas Ellie's just gone through this tragic event weeks before
Right.
we see her, right? And it is, I think, yeah, maybe we're going to get a little bit more of her learning the wrong things from him and more of them feeding off of each other, right? With this dealing with all this awfulness around them through creating more of it. Taking like going back to that revenge idea with the second game, right? And just kind of having the first one kind of set it up a little bit more of just like this is a little bit of a toxic relationship between the two of them.
Mm, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, dude, it's they're doing a really great job. The character moments are there where they need to be there. All the possible subtext is there. I'm just excited to keep watching. I'm curious as because I know if some people have talked about they're probably going to weave in Left Behind chronologically where you play in the game after
Yeah,
the university section. So I'm really curious to see. You gotta assume Left Behind is like an episode of its own, or
it must be.
yeah.
it
Yeah.
must be, right? Like you would assume that Joel falls in the university, gets stabbed, and then immediately the episode following that is left behind. I'm excited to see that too, man. It's just excellent. I leading up to the show, I replayed part one with Jimena and her sister. They were both watching while I played, and
Hmm.
even they, now being fans of the game as well, they're still noticing all the little things, and they're still,
Yeah.
when Tess asks Ellie if Ellie was on her own in episode 2, and she stumbles for a bit, and then she says, "Yeah, I was by myself at the mall." They both like caught that, and it's excellent, man. It's surreal that this is happening, and it's being done this well. I can't believe it, and this is leading into a huge storm of video game series and movies and adaptations, and I wonder to what varying degrees of quality, but it's just interesting to see how this is such a hit. We already had a lot of announcements leading up to the show, but it seems like we're getting an announcement of a new show by the day.
Yeah. And I think I'm just thinking as well, like there's been people saying all these other existing game adaptations that have been out, like this is the first, but this is the first I can think of that's such a direct adaptation.
Definitely.
It's based on the existing story, like beginning, ending, beat by beat, whereas a lot of these other ones are taking characters and ideas and they're closer to what like a comic book movie adaptation is, where it's these ideas that exist in this franchise, you're boiling them down into something new. This
Totally.
is much closer to like what a typical like book adaptation would be like, right? And I do think we might see a little bit more of that from here on out. I don't necessarily think there's that many games out there where that should be the case. Things need to be followed so closely. I hope people don't take the wrong idea of this, where I'm seeing a lot of praise for how closely things are being adapted. Um, I, but we've seen in the past, right? Like just taking something, making it one for one doesn't necessarily add anything to it. It might just bring out the flaws in it.
Totally.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
it's a testament to Naughty Dog specifically, right? Naughty Dog has always been the cinematic game developer, right? There's not a single developer out there, in my opinion, that puts out more cinematic level stuff, right? Like their shots are beautiful, their editing, their pacing, their cinematography is always to a different level. Their motion capture, the way they tell stories, the messages, it's all very cinematic, and that's why it can translate so well to a series. But when you think about the Horizon show that they're talking about, I agree with
Yes.
with
Yeah.
Cam. It's like I don't I don't want that show to be a one-to-one translation,
Yeah.
because that
Uh,
just wouldn't work. But if you do,
50 episodes, season one.
if you do a Horizon show well, and you take the main story bits, right, and you take the main characters and certain side quests that are really important, and you can weave that into a narrative. But I agree with Cam where it's not one to one. Where The Last of Us, literally, there's some shots that are exactly the same. We were
Yeah.
talking about the script is the same at points. They literally say word for word. Uh, you wouldn't want that with a Horizon show. Another one that could work, very very close direction and a very very close sort of adaptation would be God of War. Right, there's that
Yeah.
God of War
Mm.
Amazon Prime show. It scares the shit out of me that it's an Amazon Prime show, man. Uh, Listen, I love The Boys. I think The Boys is like one of the best superhero things out ever. I adore The Boys. I think it's excellent. Uh, when it comes to other Amazon Prime shows, they're not there. I
Mm.
feel like The Boys is
Yeah.
is its own category, and then it's everything else. So I'm scared for our God of War Amazon show.
Yeah, that's one where there is no part of me that is looking forward to it. I
Yeah,
am curious of it, but I'd have to see at least a couple of episodes before I think I could even be all that, yeah, even hopeful for
totally.
any of it.
Yeah.
What do you think
I mean,
about the God of War show, Emmett?
I was just gonna say, I don't think that should be a show to begin with. Like,
Mm,
God of War, whether or not you're talking about the new games or the original trilogy or even the PSP games, really, like to be completely honest with you, the only thing that I can see translating to a television show fairly frictionless are something like the PSP games where it is lower stakes, lower scale. Even like God of War Ascension, like though that's more of a low key story to translate. If you want to translate the big bombastic energy of the PS4 games, the PS5 game, or any of the original trilogy, what type of budget are we talking about for an
Yeah,
Amazon TV series? Like
Yeah.
totally.
that should be a big budget movie, and then maybe like a trilogy of movies so you can cover everything potentially. Because that just
Yeah, the
for God of
setting
War,
and everything
yeah,
in it, I totally agree. It's big
yeah.
budget, and I mean Amazon has
Yeah.
money, but have we seen them do big budget that well? I didn't see the Lord of the Rings show. I know there's people that really
Lord of the
enjoyed
Rings
that.
was budget wise pretty nuts.
That's what I've
Um,
heard.
Mm.
Yeah, and I've heard that
but
it translates well onto the show. I'm not familiar with it.
in, but it's also like God of War isn't Lord of the Rings, so like,
Right.
are they going to put that money into it, right?
I
It's
guarantee
scary. I
they're
mean,
not.
they haven't said a lot. The few things they've said about it seem like the right things to say, right? Like they said that Sony Santa Monica is involved, Cory Barlog is involved in helping. I don't know if it's to the degree that Neil is for The Last of Us, but
Right.
you gotta assume with this new boom that we're getting of video game adaptations, you have to assume that studios and producers are understanding the value of staying true to the original by having the original team be
Yeah.
part of it. So I would hope that the people that are making this Amazon God of War show are seeing The Last of Us and are seeing why it's important that they have Neil on it and give Corey the same level of sort of power, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a little bit of what the difference seems to be now between a good and a bad adaptation. And I think too often it's you have these people that come from the film industry and they look at video games and it's not even the individual game, they look at games as a whole as people are playing them for action because maybe that's what
Mm,
they go to them for. They have movies, that's clearly what they are in love with. That's why that's their career. And they don't quite understand that it's not players enjoying this because it's an interactive action movie. It's there's something else there. And I think a lot of the time you end up with things where the heart is missing a little bit. The
Hmm.
vulnerability is missing because you don't have any stake in it. You don't connect with the character the same way. We've seen like with The Last of Us, how many times have we seen Joel die because we've messed up, right? We understand stakes and what can go wrong a little bit. We see the worst case scenario, so we can kind of get in there and understand his fear a little bit more. They've been doing a good job translating that, and I think when you look at things like the Tomb Raider movie that came out,
mm. The Alicia
uh
Oh,
Vikander
the
one.
Alicia Vikander, yeah.
yeah, that I didn't love because it felt like even the game itself, I think going back to it, things don't there's a lot of cool ideas there, and I think it was exciting back in 2013 because we got this new reboot that had all the right ideas on paper.
Mm,
There's a lot of cool things there. It was taking itself much more seriously. But going back and replaying it, it's just a lot of pieces that don't work together. Like I couldn't tell you what that main bad guy's name was, what his motivation was.
same.
Like
And there was like a
I can tell you the
supernatural
first
twist to it at the end, and you're like, wait, what?
yeah, and I remember that first hour being impactful, and I remember the last hour being like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And nothing in between necessarily from a story standpoint translates. And I think the movie just kind of looked at it as, oh, people liked this plane crashing sequence
Mm,
and all these times she got beaten up and how tough she is, but you lose a lot of just like, it's not just about being a badass, it's you really need to get into this vulnerability a little bit more. You
totally.
need to feel for these characters. Um, and I'm hoping that's what we get more of. Less of like what Uncharted was like last year. I think it was a very similar thing of they look at video games and they think these are teenage boys who think this is cool and we need to make cool things with these big set pieces and that's not quite what makes these
Yeah.
things work.
It and I was actually thinking of bringing up Uncharted. I still never saw it, right, but I know the general idea of it,
Same.
and it seems like it's It's exactly what you're saying, Cam, where they're like, oh, they like Uncharted for, the cool set pieces. And yeah, that's one of the cool things about Uncharted, but there's other things, right? There's a character dynamics, and I think everyone agrees that Mark Wahlberg is not the guy to be Sully,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they and so they're in the Uncharted movie, it seemed from an outsider's perspective like they're like, "Oh, you think the plane scene's cool, right? We're going to put the plane scene in there, and you think the ship at the end of part 4 is cool. Well, we're gonna put the ship
Yeah.
flying in the air, and it just seems like they focused on the wrong aspects of it. Whereas The Last of Us, right, is focusing on the right things. And speaking of Tomb Raider, I find it very interesting. They recently announced, I forget her name, she's the one who
Phoebe
does
Waller
Fleabag,
Bridge.
Phoebe Waller
Yeah.
Bridge. She's like headlining a Tomb Raider show, and that I think has a lot of really great potential, right? Because it 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 I think is going to do the proper thing of not directly adapting the Tomb Raider games, which have been like Cam said, hit or miss. Like at first they were exciting, but who do you know that's like Shadow of the Tomb Raider is my shit. It's the greatest game. Like
Look, I have a feel. I still haven't played Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Everything everyone says about that game makes me think I'm gonna love it. So I
I
just,
well,
for
that's
whatever
because
reason, I haven't
you're a
played.
weirdo.
I played
True,
two
true.
thirds of it. I started to replay it like a couple weeks ago. People aren't wrong. I don't think necessarily it's just there's a lot of cool stuff and I think people are too harsh on it, but it is one of just that series I think at its core never had a great foundation of building these
Yeah.
characters and it begins to add in character flaws that I feel like the audience's connection to Lara is unearned at that point to be adding at the level of her messing up, maybe.
Yeah, they're
But yeah,
just unfortunately like the new Tomb Raider games, the new Tomb Raiders like threequel trilogy threequel. Wow.
yeah,
Uh,
Prequel.
to me, it's just forgettable at the end of the day. Unfortunately, I played the first one, and I started Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I remember playing like maybe a third of that game or a fourth, and just not being into it and dipping
yeah,
out of it. But that's why I think Phoebe Waller Bridge is really interesting because we're going back to what when they started announcing The Last of Us, right? And they said it's gonna be Craig Mazin, right, the guy who meant Chernobyl. You're you're giving these projects to elite creators, right, and who have very distinct styles that you can see translating well, right? If you see Chernobyl and you see a lot of the things that they do there, and you think of the same people behind it doing a Last of Us show, you can see the translation. You can see how that can work really well. And I think for Phoebe Waller Bridge, I think she can do a really nice, a really good Tomb Raider game where she's not translating the game one to one, but maybe taking the best aspects of it.
yeah, and bring in more of the character, like create something, create these new connections between people and between the audience and Lara. Probably better than like it feels. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus that would have written on those previous games, but like,
Fuck you, Crystal. No, I'm kidding.
but I mean, it's they're not her, and very few people are, right?
Right.
So I think that's kind of exciting. Just someone who I'd be excited to see her work on anything, and the fact that she wants to work on a franchise that we've all enjoyed, but maybe has been having a rough period finding its footing. Like, I
Mhm.
think that is something to be excited about.
I I would say because as someone who's played, because yeah, I've played Rise of the Tomb Raider and the reboot. Also played a little bit of Underworld and even like Anniversary way back in the day. So I've been and some of the top down ones too. I almost forgot. Long story short, played a lot of Tomb Raider in my day. I think the problem with Tomb Raider translating it into a series that isn't video games is the reason people like Tomb Raider is because it's fun to play. It's
Yeah.
fun to explore. Like even in the rebooted one, the 2013 reboot, I did everything you could in that game. I explored everything, found everything, upgraded everything. Would have got the platinum if there was no multiplayer trophies. And I enjoy that experience. That's one of my favorite experiences I've had. Nothing about that story is in my brain. Same thing for Rise, and I'm sure once I get around to Shadow, same thing there. Same thing for Underworld that I beat. Same thing for Anniversary that I played. Like the narrative of Tomb Raider is nothing. So the people are doing exactly what you're talking about, where they're taking it for the action, or
Yeah.
even in the case of like the the Angelina Jolie movies.
Right.
You're taking that template because everyone knows Laura Croft. Now you're just getting Laura Croft into some other wacky, slightly similar tasting, feeling adventures. So when Phoebe Waller-Bridge gets involved, I will say I was a little bit timid because I knew her from Fleabag. I knew
Yeah.
her. I pretty much I just knew her from Fleabag and other smaller projects. I was like, you're really getting her. It felt like they are assigning her to Tomb Raider rather than her choosing Tomb Raider. But then I thought about it and I'm like, well, she is in Indiana Jones,
That's what I
the
was
new
gonna
one that's about
say,
to come
right?
out. Yeah, so she
Yeah.
must have like
Well, the
some type of passion for adventure. So perhaps this is a good template for her to exercise that passion
that's the
onto.
thing that
And yeah,
sorry, that's the thing that I find interesting about that pick is that they didn't they didn't announce, hey, Michael Bay's doing the next Tomb Raider, because if that's the announcement, you know what you're looking at, right? It's like, all right, well, more of
hmm
the same. The fact that it's someone who's so great at creating characters is what has me excited about it, because it can bring that fun aspect of it that you enjoy from a video game. It can translate it where the gameplay's not the fun aspect of it, but the characters and the
Yeah.
dynamics are the fun aspect of it, which is something that Uncharted does so well. And obviously, Uncharted and Tomb Raider are franchises that sort of feed into each other, and they're in this cycle of feeding off of one another. But you know, what Uncharted does so well is the characters. It's the thing that I love the most about those games is those
Yeah.
dynamics and those connections. And I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge can do that on a show really, really well. It's exciting for me.
Yeah, like that's another one with Uncharted is like the movie also one of its issues was it just failed even more so than changing up who the characters are. They fundamentally misunderstood what those relationships were.
Mm.
And so that's what even those set pieces they have a different context in terms of like he has what Nate would be losing by dying is a lot different in that movie at that point than he is at the end of that third game, right?
Mm.
hmm
And him messing up and getting himself into this situation has more stakes to it than just kind of opening the movie with that big set piece that we don't care, right? Like it's not there's not enough going into it. And I do think, yeah, just getting someone who's coming off of such a big like I did not reboot, but like bringing back Indiana Jones for what should be this big finale, and
Right.
it's been
I
talked
hope
about
so.
for like a decade at this point, and they're bringing in the right director, I think, for it. The guy who is making a career out of sending off old men, right? Like, I think she's I think they're going to probably market it as like, hey, this character, this actress that you all liked from this big new movie, she's going to be working on this similar thing. Um, and so I guess, yeah, I am kind of interested just to. I think this will be a good take.
I
I hope
agree.
it's a good take.
I
hmm
And
agree.
I think there's a lot, like, I'm a lot less precious feeling of this franchise
The
because
Tomb Raider
it's,
lore.
yeah, because it's been rebooted and because
Totally.
it's been so rocky in general. It's like maybe that is the right thing to.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like they can have more fun with it. You know, they can get a little wackier, and I don't think anybody's gonna get that offended, right? Whereas in The Last of Us, if it's Joel and suddenly there's, I don't know, Ellie's a totally different character, and
Yeah.
there's no Tess, there's this other, you would feel offended,
Ellie
right?
played by Kiki Palmer, part
Yeah,
two.
you'd say
Yeah.
what the hell is this?
That'd
But
be wild.
if you do that to Tomb Raider, I don't think anybody, obviously Lara Croft, but everything around Lara Croft is like, whatever. Who fucking cares? Have
Yeah.
fun with it. Make something good. And the thing that I go back to that Cam said that I am seeing a lot more of in this post Last of Us world that has me very excited is that the video games adaptations are not just, oh, we're making this game into a movie. It's we're attaching high level creators, people who make excellent original content to adapt this into a film or a movie. The same way that, like Cameron said, we've done with books for years, right? It seems like video games are actually getting respect, and I know people in the games world have always strived for that, right? Like, oh, appreciate video games as art and for what they are. Obviously we understand what video games are, but now other creators in different mediums are seeing that as well, are seeing the value of adapting these things and creating TV shows and movies the way that you do for a book. It seems like they're taking it a lot more seriously, right? When Craig Mazin is attached to it, to a project, you understand that he's not just gonna get a summary of the game's plot and then go with it on himself. You understand that he's adapting it for what it is, and it seems like that's the boom that we're getting. It seems that's why it's going to be prestige TV and movies, and that's what has me excited about it. I think
Yeah.
the one show I'm most nervous about is, if not the God of War show for how much I love it, it's just the Horizon show. I just don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm actually very interested in Horizon Show because from the rumors, or I don't know if this stuff's confirmed, they talk about it as if it's going to be a prequel show. And
Yeah.
that is
Yeah, that's
very
true.
fascinating to me because Lord knows, like, I think this is also a Netflix production.
Yeah.
Netflix TV show budget, you're not animating those robots. That's not happening. But I could totally see like a expanse level budget for like I don't want to spoil anything, but if you played Horizon Forbidden West, the Ted Faro story,
Mm,
that could be fascinating to watch. Just like everything that happened in the bunkers leading up to where you get in the games, that could be fascinating. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other stories similar to how Fallout, another show that's getting an adaptation, or another game that's getting adaptation for a show. Fallout sounds so interesting because all those vaults have a different fascinating story in them,
yeah, and
and that could
you
easily
can go
be,
wild. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
Fallout, I think, could easily be very cool.
agreed.
Mhm.
Because that's another one where it's closer to Tomb Raider of like, take these elements, go out there, play with them. Um, Horizon, I think part of why I'd be worried about it, even with the prequel, is like it does have a beginning and end that we know. We know exactly what the end result is. It's Horizon. Even if that's a completely different direction, humanity's gone for a long
Right.
time. I would be more excited if I knew right off the bat that's a miniseries, I think.
Mm.
I think it being announced just as they're making a show makes me a little worried of like, how much are you going to stretch this out? Or do you have something in mind of like we can expand on this idea and make it interesting and we know exactly what we want to do with it?
The thing that spooks me the most about the Horizon show is that Horizon, the story of both, for me, Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, is one that is best told through a video game. It's the discovery of,
Yeah.
slowly getting the pieces of what happened and getting the actual story. And then even in Forbidden West, once you already know what happened, it's still those moments where we talk about the Vegas moment, right? Of finding Vegas
Yeah.
and exploring it and finding out what
Yeah.
happened within it. And I think that just lends itself to a video game perfectly because you're exploring environments, you're finding audio logs, you're doing all these things where I just see it doesn't translate as well in my eyes to a TV show, right? And
Yeah.
it scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I think Horizon works because discovering the past, you're kind of it's both seeing the result of where they are is both painting the past and our current day in a positive and negative light of like things like the Vegas sequence and different little things you find from the past kind of create like a more it creates a sense of wonder about what we have around us today and like the beauty in these things. And then you get into like the Ted Faro stuff, which is who's making the Horizon show? Is it
I have
Amazon?
I think it's
I think
Netflix.
Netflix is Netflix.
Netflix?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say because if it's Amazon, I'm like,
That's literally Jeff
Ted Faro
Bezos.
yeah.
just replace.
Then
Literally
yeah,
Jeff
that
Bezos.
I wouldn't expect that they could at all get it because they would have to miss the point,
Well,
right?
I will say to the benefit of, and I'm not trying to be on Amazon's side here, but if you see The Boys, right? The
Right.
Boys is literally like staring at the camera and saying, Jeff Bezos, you're a piece of shit. And it has
Yeah.
the Amazon logo and they ship it out. So give them credit on that one end that at least
I
they
bet
I
don't.
Bezos doesn't even know that show exists.
Probably
I think
not.
he's
that's
too
my
busy
thing is I think they saw
eating
the nudity in
gold.
the first episode of The Boys and they're like, oh, people like this. It's a raunchy thing or whatever. I don't think they've watched it.
They
I'm not
understand
convinced
the
that they
Yeah.
know
meaning
what's going
behind it.
on.
It's like the
Yeah.
all the MAGA people, like they're like, yeah, we love
Yeah.
Homelander. It's like, man, you really don't fucking get it. You
Yeah.
really don't get it. All right.
Yeah. I mean, they're using Punisher bumper stickers, so like I can't understand.
Yeah.
They don't have media literacy. It's over.
One
But yeah,
that I'm surprised we haven't talked about because I guess it's
there's
because
a
it hasn't
couple.
come out, but it's something that I'm extremely excited about, and everything that they've showed so far is doing all the right things, all the proper references to the games, giving the right context for certain things that are doing. That's the Mario movie. Dude, I'm
Yeah.
so fucking
Ah,
excited for the Mario movie. Everything they've showed about that movie so far seems perfect. The fact that they're explaining the 2D games by being like training grounds for Mario, right? There's
Yeah.
so many little things here that bring the games to an important light. The fact that they're putting Mario Kart into it, it all seems like it's done really well. And the few clips we've had, they use the proper music, they use the proper sound effects. It seems like they're handling this with a lot of love and care. And it's Mario. It's the most recognizable video game character. And it
Yeah.
really seems like they're knocking it out of the park. There's already like galaxy sort of nods and references. Like it just seems like they're doing such a fucking good job at the Mario movie. And I think it goes back to everything we've been talking about in this episode.
yeah, I think that movie's gonna be really good. I think what's very interesting about that movie is that we've been talking about, oh, The Last of Us is a perfect adaptation because it's
Yeah.
literally just translating the story to a different medium. What's fascinating about Mario is that it's also an adaptation, but it's not necessarily saying the story of Mario rescuing Peach is the story we're telling. It's
It
saying no, it's translating the mechanics,
it's
the
Yeah.
it's reverse
way the
engineering
game
it.
is.
It's reverse
Yes.
engineering it where they're not adapting the story. They're giving context to the games, right? They're
Yeah.
almost explaining. Oh, why does Mario race all his friends? They're gonna give an explanation and a reason for that to be there that makes sense in the world that they're setting up, and that I think is the best way you could tackle a Mario movie. I don't think any of us want to see, oh, Bowser captured Peach. Oh, let's go
Right.
jump. And now we're in the
Yeah,
desert
so
level, and
basic at
now
this
we're in the.
point.
It's they're giving context for everything, and it seems like they're having a lot of fun with it. And it seems excellent. I'm extremely excited for the Mario movie.
It's very Lego movie in a way of like it
Yes, I was just about to say
understands
that. Yeah.
Yes.
what the audience's connection is with these things, and it's like the Lego movie played more with what the connection is of like how kids play with these toys and what it means to them. Um, and this seems a little bit more of like what Mario means to its audience and just understanding like these elements are important, but like whatever's in the games, whatever's in this existing source material, their connections to each other aren't quite like they're not sacred. They're like we're cool with you experimenting with the right things, not
Oh yeah.
trying to not missing the point of what people are here for, right?
Yeah. It's when I saw the trailer, the biggest moment of brilliance for me is seeing those what appears to be like a training ground where
Yeah.
it's literally the 2D games. You have the fireballs, you have the blocks, and it's this it's giving context to for why suddenly Mario's in a two-dimensional space,
Mhm.
right? But it's doing it in a really cool way of yeah, he's practicing, he's training, he's getting stronger, and they're still having all those touch tones that we know and love from the Mario games. And it seems like they have Smash references in there that have a place in just everything that they've done that they've showed about the Mario movie has me excited and opens the door for a different kind of video game adaptation where it's not the Last of Us approach of going one for one and adapting it and making it what it was, but it's explaining the gameplay and like we were saying reverse engineering it. So
Good.
it's such a good time right now for video game adaptations. It seems like this could easily be one of the next big things, right? Like comic book adaptations at a point were terrible and there was
Yeah.
a ton of them and they weren't good, and then a few good ones came out, and then it blew to be the gigantic industry that it is, right? And I could easily see the same thing happening to video game adaptations.
Yeah. And I think it's very like there's been things in the past that have worked, but it's the curse I think is only broken once you get that consistency of people understanding the different ways you can adapt these things. Like, sure, one-off things in the past, you might think it broke a curse or whatever, but it didn't, because for the rest of the year, anytime some video game related adaptation came out, it was probably garbage, right? And it continued that way for a while. So it's I think that, yeah, if we get a few at the beginning of this year through the next year, like, that are knocking it out of the park, then I think there's at least different, I don't want to say a template out there, but a whole bunch of different things that are modern and at once, and active creators that understand, like, okay, these are the different methods we can go about this in the future.
100%. And we're in this big boom of seeing how adaptations benefit the general public and the games themselves, and that's, I think, why you're seeing things like PlayStation Productions really going ham and green lighting a bunch of stuff. Because I think The Witcher is one of the first ones that started this boom, where the Witcher Netflix show came out. It was a big hit for Netflix, and then suddenly the Witcher sales went up like 300%.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
you have the Cyberpunk anime that did the same thing for Cyberpunk, and kind of redeemed Cyberpunk. Like, think about
Yeah.
how people look at Cyberpunk now before like versus when it came out. After the anime, people went in droves to play Cyberpunk, and nowadays people talk good about Cyberpunk, right? And people
Yeah.
enjoy Cyberpunk again, which is,
For sure.
it's crazy that that an anime redeemed that game, and now we're getting it with The Last of Us, where it's a gigantic show on. It's like literally like breaking HBO records, or right behind HBO, like Game of Thrones numbers, and it's also driving gigantic sales for the
Yeah.
games. And you gotta assume when Mario comes out, it'll be the same thing, right? It's kids who love Mario, people like us who've loved Mario our whole lives. Suddenly, Switch sales, I'm sure, are gonna go through the fucking roof, and Mario games sales are gonna go through the roof. And it seems like it's in a really good state right now, where video game companies are understanding what to do with these properties. Creators are understanding how to do these properties justice, and it's just feeding off of one another in really good ways. And I think the comic book industry is probably one of the better examples of this,
Yeah.
with the only shitty caveat is that usually comic book creators don't get a lot of the love, right? And they don't get
Recognition
Right.
for it.
the recognition and the money for it.
Or even the credit in any form, just for
Yeah,
anything.
that kind of sucks. And it appears like, at least for now, with the video game industry, it's a little bit better. There are things already happening where, I don't know if you guys saw the report. Bruce Straley, the
Yeah.
co-creator
Yeah.
of the first Last of Us, isn't getting anything for the show, and that's not cool, right? Like,
Yeah.
I understand he doesn't work at Naughty Dog anymore. They parted ways, but he created everything that we're seeing. He co-created it, so it sucks that he's not getting, at least, obviously, in the perfect world, he would get financial gain and credit for it. But at the
Yeah.
minimum, give him credit. At the very
Credit,
fucking
yeah.
minimum, he should get the
Certainly,
credit for
certainly.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely a problem with a lot of that stuff. Yeah, hopefully they just fix that, because I feel like, film and TV industries have always, or not always, but for a very long time, they're unionized out the wazoo. People getting their residual checks for reruns of sitcoms they wrote one episode of. So, like, people
Mhm.
on that side have it locked down. The conversation has been changing for like a year or two now in video games, of unionization and making sure people get credited properly, and changing a
Yeah.
lot of these harmful practices that, the passion is what people have been working off of for so long, where that passion's kind of running dry, considering all these layoffs and stuff, and just the
Yeah.
stress of working in general. So I like to think that once these, I mean, we're already kind of going full steam ahead with these video game adaptations, but I think a year or two down the line, when you got multiple, Emmy award winning series, or multiple just top grossing on Netflix shows going, that are all video game adaptations, by then I think the conversation will have changed and
Yeah.
shifted to the point where
And
it's like, oh, this Deus Ex show, yeah, we're War Inspector's on the front headline every time. Like, something like that is going to
Yeah.
be more common.
totally, you would optimistically hope that this can help drive the conversation forward for unionizing the video game industry, which is something that I know at, anybody that we interact with is very passionate about.
Especially after
In
the last
our
month.
circles. Yeah, right. Especially after how shitty the video game industry is, you hope, you want to hope that video games as a whole being more valuable and profitable and expanding onto other mediums that are already unionized could help the industry. That would be a fucking fantastic side effect.
Yeah,
Good
people are
hope.
going to start seeing the grass is greener on that side once we start interacting with the
Yeah.
film industry more. So I think
Totally.
things will change pretty fucking quick when you see that.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a good
Any
point.
Yeah, go
I
ahead, go
didn't
ahead.
think because I never thought about just the idea of like once these things start getting adapted, that does give these existing writers, yeah, a crossover point possibly of like, well, we've worked on these things you're adapting, and if more people start to switch over from, even if it's just writers, begin to work more on like films than games and stuff, then yeah, maybe there is a conversation there a little bit more, right? Um, maybe when, yeah, writers are getting, maybe when it is just writers begin to get proper credit and the rest of these developers don't, and that can get the ball rolling in some way a little bit. Like, it's hard to tell when I understand a little bit more of how the film stuff works. I don't for video games. Like I know it's a mess, and I know way more people seem to work on games than movies, unless it's like huge
Right. Yeah.
blockbuster.
Normally, your staff is larger and they're working on a project for longer than for a movie.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's hard to tell, but like you would hope that video games getting more respect in general means maybe these creators do too.
Yeah, and it's the video game, the big names in the industries that right, in the video game industry, they're it seems like they're going to start to be in this sort of like dual role where Neil is at, where I'm sure they're working on, Neil is helping with the Last of Us multiplayer game and whatever the next single player Naughty Dog IP or sequel or whatever it is. I'm sure he's there, but he's also doing this other job of adapting the game, right, for
Yeah.
the HBO show. And it seems like Cory Barlog is going to do the same thing. And I wonder if Herman Hulst is involved at all with Gorilla, or you gotta assume Kojima's going to do some fucking shit, right? Like
Yeah.
he already said he's going to
Oh,
do a movie or a show or
Death
something.
Stranding show, yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like if these big names in the industry are sort of going between multiple mediums, it could be of assistance and hopefully, you know, helping both industries thrive. But yeah, like Kojima's coming up, man. Kojima's gonna come out with some shit.
Certainly, it's definitely going to happen. So I wanted to know, just to, it seems like we're getting towards the end of this part of the conversation. So to wrap it up, I want to say this. I'm going to put something in chat right now for both of y'all.
Ooh.
Instead of reading this whole list, I'm just going to let y'all look at it. It's a list IGN made of the current upcoming film and TV adaptations of video games. And I just want to, I'm not going to go through the whole list. I'm
Holy
just going to
crap.
ask, like, yeah, it's a lot, right? What is like the one movie and the one TV show of this list that you are most like interested in? Because I was looking at this, there's stuff on here that I didn't even know was happening. Like I didn't know Saints Row was gonna happen. Like we already
Yeah.
have Don't Be a Menace While Drinking Juice in the Hood, so why is Saints Row here? But yeah, I didn't know a lot of the stuff was going
Oh
on.
my
I
god.
would say movie I'm most interested in just to see if this is gonna work. Um, or not to see if it's gonna work, but I think everyone's talking like, oh, what's going to be the video game thing that gets the Academy Awards and whatnot? I think Firewatch has the most juice for that because
Yeah.
that
Mm.
is the perfect like indie darling type of thing. The perfect like you get two good actors that just have some charisma over their voice or whatever. You could really make something special out of that, and I think that just has awards bait written all over it.
Speaking of awards, I'm extremely curious to see how The Last of Us does at the Emmys, because it's, dude, like,
Oh, it will.
It will get makeup for sure. I
yeah,
don't know, like for everything else, like I don't know if there's an adaptation category like
I don't know
there
either.
is with the Oscars, but like it will get some form of nominations for sure just by having that like makeup category in there, probably production design. Um
Because what I'm thinking
and I
about
think
too is, and it's currently it is HBO's premiere show, right? It's their
Yep.
Sunday primetime show. They are
Prime dime.
they're prime time. They're treating this as their premiere show, and HBO premiere shows tend to, at least the nominations, sweep the board, right? Every actor tends to be
Yeah.
nominated. They're nominated for best drama. They're nominated for best screenplay, best directing. Normally, the HBO premiere shows are some of the heavy hitters when it comes to nominations. So I'm very curious to see if The Last of Us is going to get that respect and that love. And you know, I guess it's a good way to tell where we're at in terms of critical, and respect for these.
Yeah, not looking at like I don't know exactly what the categories are, but I would say you're looking at a minimum of makeup, production design, maybe something for music if that's a thing, and then I would think Bella Ramsey probably like they love having a good not she's not a child actor but she's playing the
She's
role of a
young, yeah,
child,
of course, of
and
course.
I think the award shows always love that someone young that's killing it and she's going to have some big
Yeah,
opportunities
you
too,
gotta
and I
assume
think
Pedro is in there, right? Like Pedro
he
Pascal
could
is in
be.
such a great moment of his career, and he's headlining an HBO show.
And I think if episode 3 is as good as people say, I think Nick Offerman, there's a chance.
Totally,
Oh yeah.
Um, as like a guest role or something. Like there's usually some kind of category like that. So I could see that.
100%.
Yeah, I definitely think that could happen. I think Last of Us is gonna. I don't think it's gonna clean up, but it will get a lot of nominations, and that's gonna be a big deal for
Yeah.
folks anyway. I
100%.
will say for show that I'm most excited from this list. I was gonna be cheeky and say Gears of War because I like the
Mhm.
story in Gears of War 5 a lot. But when I think about all the games leading up to Gears of War 5, the story is not necessarily the main reason
Yeah.
I'm playing.
Mm,
So I'm gonna just go with Fallout. Even though we've talked about Fallout already, like the idea of like some of those vaults being translated into like just give
totally.
me a different vault every episode, and that
Yeah.
just sounds like premium television to me.
That can
So
I
yeah,
work
I'm
think
down.
really, really well.
I really do think Fallout will probably be good.
I agree. I
Hmm.
agree. It's just it's one of those where you can see the translation to a premiere show really well, where you don't necessarily have to reverse engineer like you do for the Mario movie as much, right? I think you have to be really clever to adapt. I see Mega Man is in here, right? Like if Mega Man
Yeah.
has the
Yeah.
same level of care that the Mario movie does, then that could be a banger too, but it's not guaranteed. You have to have really clever creative people to sort of reverse engineer these things, whereas Fallout, dude, Fallout can be a banger. You just you can tell really cool vault stories and go
Yeah.
from there, right? Like
That could
it
just be Black Mirror.
a hundred
Yeah.
percent, and it can work extremely well. So it's an exciting time for video game adaptations done well. It's I have found that I really enjoy experiencing a story that I love, like The Last of Us, through a different perspective and a different medium. I appreciate watching it that way. I appreciate the fact that this story that I'm intimately familiar with and I've loved for so many years, for a decade, right? Uh, can be told in a different way, and it can still keep me on my toes, but it can still at the same time give me all the feelings that I had when I first experienced it. And I hope we just keep it up. I think The Last of Us could be, the Dark Knight trilogy of video game adaptations. This one thing that took it to a different level of the general populace understanding, right? There were Batman
Yeah.
movies before that, and people liked them, and they had varying degrees of good. But when the Dark Knight trilogy came out, that really shifted the
Yeah.
landscape, and I think this can do the same thing for video games.
Yeah, and I am curious like looking at this list, I'm also like it's at the same time after all of this making me think like, oh my god, we could easily go back to
Oh
like
yeah,
things being bad again where
Oh
dude.
yeah.
even ones on here like I know also on this list like The Division, I was reading up on that recently. Like Jake Gyllenhaal and Jessica Chastain were attached like I think it was announced in December like that's a
That's
no-go.
true. Yeah, yeah.
Um there's ones on here like I think Five Nights at Freddy's that I think did get some news recently. But
Hmm.
like there's other ones that just It Takes Two does not need to be a movie.
No.
Like, I think it totally works as like a DreamWorks
Yeah, I can see that.
semi-animated thing. Like, but
Yeah.
there are like, I mean, I guess that does have a better chance than a Pac-Man or Just Dance. Although Just Dance probably is my one on here that I'm the most like.
Honestly, you just make a Step Up movie and call it Just Dance.
Yeah,
and
that's
then-
kind of what I'm thinking is like if
Really?
Step Up
I was
is
thinking
done,
the
then
Emoji
Yeah.
Movie, but with music.
oh maybe I was picturing just Step Up of like if they can bring that kind of thing back, maybe that's interesting.
It's such a hodgepodge.
Not necessarily good,
dude.
but
It's such a
yeah.
hodgepodge because then, I agree with you. It's like Pac-Man. I don't know, but then I see Sifu and I'm like, that could be fucking awesome
Sifu
if
could be
it's
cool.
done right. Like,
That's a John Wick guy too.
and that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Like the John Wick level of action with the mechanics of Sifu in a movie, I'm like, that could be fucking badass, man. I could see that being
Yeah.
excellent. And there's
Sifu, like especially because he'll be like some old man at the end of it. Like
yeah, dude.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Like,
That's cool as
Oh.
shit.
That would be awesome. Also, another random one I'm thinking here: Space Channel 5. I know no one has thought about Space Channel 5 in like 10 years, but
Yeah,
with the
what is
Barbie movie
Space
about
Channel 5?
Space Channel 5 is a Dreamcast game where you're basically like a space newscaster, and it was like very like K-pop anime, like dancey.
Oh.
What's that show? Like Sailor Moon vibes, like very bright, very animated, very like I don't know, just upbeat, cheery attitude. And
Yeah.
yes, you're like, oh, how could that be a movie? I'm thinking about that Barbie movie that's about to come out. Do something
Mm.
in that vein with Space
Oh,
Channel
fuck
5.
yeah.
I'd
Fuck
be in
yeah.
the theaters for that.
That'd be cool.
No, totally.
Yeah.
A few others that pop out, and going back to PlayStation. I think PlayStation games, PlayStation Studios games lend themselves so well for these adaptations because they're usually very cinematic, right? PlayStation Studios games have this sort of vibe that they all go for that PlayStation likes to put out. They're making a Ghost of Tsushima movie. That can be a fucking great
could be
movie.
cool.
That could be. I could see
Yeah.
that being, if it's done to the level of care that the game was done with, right? And
Yeah.
you think about how the game has so many homages to. I forget the Japanese director for the old Japanese westerns. What's the name?
Oh, like
Oh,
It
Lord.
has the mode in it. I'm forgetting his name and I'm blanking on it.
Kurosawa.
Kurosawa, right?
Yes.
It has the Kurosawa mode and stuff. You can translate that to a movie very, very well as a homage to old Kurosawa movies. And then what was the other one that I thought of that's interesting? It's in that Super Mario movie sort of reverse engineer idea of it is the Gran Turismo movie, right? Like you hear about the Gran
Yeah.
Turismo movie and you're like, how the fuck does that work? But then you hear about the plot and you're like, oh, that could
Yeah,
be
the
fucking
fact that-
a good movie.
It being based on a true story makes it like the idea on paper when I heard it was like, oh, I don't like that. But then I heard it's based on a true story. It's like, oh, well, then if there's something there to actually draw from, then
Yeah.
like,
An actual
Okay.
story.
yeah,
And I forget who's attached to that movie, but it's a well known
I-
name.
I
Yeah.
think I always fuck up his name. This guy from Blood Diamond and Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Digimon Hutsu, I want to say, but I might have
oh
butchered
yeah,
that.
no,
Yeah. And also one of the Spice Girls. I forget.
Yeah,
which one. I think
Neil
the
Neil
red-
Blomkamp is set to direct it.
Oh, and Neil Blomkamp's the director. That's
And
the
that's what I'm
actual
saying.
name that everyone.
And that's what I'm
keep
saying. It's
forgetting.
like, you have these known names and known entities headlining these things where it's not random ex director, right? Like
yeah,
I could see Neil Blomkamp making a fucking fire movie, right? Like he makes good movies. Why wouldn't the Gran Turismo movie be good? And it goes to all these different levels of adaptations that you can have where if in 2003 they announced a Gran Turismo movie, I'm thinking that shitty Aaron Paul Need for Speed movie, right?
yeah, 100%, 100%.
God, I forgot about that one. Also, this also really quickly reminded me that Borderlands movie is coming out. I have
Ugh.
that
I don't
movie
know.
fascinates
I don't know,
me
man.
so much.
I don't know.
Here's the thing: it's not that I'm excited for the Borderlands movie. It's that I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I love Kate Blanchett. I've liked Kevin Hart more than I've not liked him. Like they're swinging for the fences with the cast, and even Eli Roth. That's a very inspired choice. That's a lot of good names putting towards Borderlands of all things, where I don't nowadays I don't hate the story of
They
Borderlands. Going off of Tales, you can make something narratively engaging with Borderlands, but it's just like, what the fuck could that be? That's such a big question
yeah.
mark, and I'm excited to see what it ends up being. Not if it's good or not, because
It's
I don't
just
know if it's gonna be good, but it'll be interesting.
the Borderlands movie is a Eli Roth, right? Big asterisk there. We can all
Yeah,
agree
that's
that's a tough
Wait,
one.
did he do something, or
Oh
is
man,
he just makes fucked up movies?
no. Is he
Because I
not
know he makes a lot of violent movies, but I'm ignorant about him as a person.
not a
I don't
good
watch his
dude?
shit, to be honest.
Not a good guy.
Oh, well,
Not
fuck.
a
All
good
right. Well,
guy.
today I've learned.
Yeah,
Jeez.
not the best
Well,
dude.
yeah.
And
Yeah. I literally, all I know about him is Hostel, and he was in that Tarantino movie. And that's it.
yeah, it's still tough.
Things are
Still
bad.
tough, but
Okay.
things aren't
All
great.
right.
But
I'll step
it's
off that land.
also
Well, I'll stay on the landmine so it doesn't blow up.
with what's his name? Who's
Oh,
the
Randy Pitchford?
Yes, I'm not shocked they're putting all this star power into it. Again, a producer on this is Avi Arad, who he's the reason we have like all these Sony kind of like Spider-Man movies. Like, I don't trust them with adaptations this way. I think he sees like popular IP, let's milk this thing.
right,
And I think with Randy Pitchford, you see the very first thing we saw about this movie, like physically saw, was him be so excited to interact with all these big celebrities that's like,
yeah,
yeah, I can easily see some scumbag like that going to some producer who sees money and just wants a chance to be involved in some way. And I don't want to say neither care about the end product, but I don't, I think one of them is looking at big IP, let's make some money off of this. And the other is looking at, man, I get to hang out with some celebrities
yeah.
and
It's like
have film producer as a title.
no. If it, actually, I don't care if it offends. Like when I trust Neil Druckmann to like be attached to a production, because he's a good creative, and I know he cares about his stories and his characters. I trust Cory Barlog, because same thing, right? He's a smart creative. He cares. He puts a lot of effort in. Is Randy Pitchford the guy that I'm like, yeah, man, yeah, I fuck it,
I need
yeah.
his vision on this.
You got it,
Oh man,
dude.
it's gonna be a lot of
I put
lost
my
USB
faith in
drives in that
you,
movie.
Randy. You know what I mean? And that's gonna fucking do
Funny
a magic
though,
trick.
I'm looking at this, and after all of our talking, like for the first 45 minutes of this, it is co-written by Eli Roth and Craig Mazin. So
No idea.
Wait, the Borderlands movie is?
yeah, the Borderlands movie. So it is like, okay, well,
All right, well, fuck me, man.
there's that.
We just spent an hour fucking talking about how we love Craig Mazin. Maybe he'll put out a
Yeah.
banger. All right.
Maybe it will be
And I think
amazing.
didn't Tim Miller take over that movie too? Cause Eli Roth stepped down or whatever.
Let me
Tim Miller's
see.
doing the reshoots right now.
The
That's-
reshoots,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
doing the reshoots. Which, yeah, I guess I do have more faith in Tim Miller than
Me too.
Roth. So, and I do think he's a much better fit from the get-go.
Just for the vibe of Borderlands.
Yeah, just for like, because Roth, I mean,
Roth
I don't
makes
have some
repulsive
love.
movies to me.
Yeah,
like
he
all
makes
his like Green Inferno. Like I'm never watching that shit. Like
Right.
he makes
like-
a lot of like torture
torture
it's
porn
like-
stuff.
yeah, it's like exploitive, not B movie horror, but very like he makes grindhouse stuff, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
pretty much. Yeah, I ain't about that life. So when he got attached to Borderlands, I was like, Borderlands is a violent game. I guess that makes sense,
Yeah.
but it's violent in a funny way. Like they never focus on like the entrails and shit. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, he died, lol. Like it's weird
And
like that. So
the
Tim
thing
Miller,
is,
definitely-
Borderlands done right? Like you have, I know, it's gonna pop. You have like Tales from Borderlands, right? And that's like a really great example of a good story told in the Borderlands universe. Even if you
Yeah.
adapt the games, if it's done well, you could, Handsome Jack can be a really cool movie villain, right?
yeah,
It
Borderlands
can
2 has
work-
great moments. Yeah,
Totally, it can work really well. It's I just don't trust Randy Pitchford all that much. But
Yeah, I don't trust. Yeah.
but we'll see,
Yeah,
man.
I
Who
do not.
knows? Listen, not every single video game adaptation needs to be The Last of Us, right? Not all of them need to be like, oh man,
True.
they might win the Emmys and incredible performance, 10 out of 10. A lot of them can just be fun, right? And as long as it goes a little bit farther than what the Uncharted movie went, where it's fun and it respects the IP a little bit more, I think that's
Yeah,
fine for a Borderlands movie.
I think even for this though, like I think Uncharted is like the highest you can hope for it.
Probably,
Which,
probably.
but I also think for something like Borderlands, that's not a bad thing. Of like, it's not starting in the same place as Uncharted, so like that might be elevating Borderlands as a story in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is. It is just very. It feels like it comes from an era of 10 years ago where
Yes.
everything was looking to get adapted, and they didn't have someone to rein in Randy, and so it's still happening.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's the I mean, even the fact that the Uncharted movie came out and it's like cohesive, it's kind of a
Yeah,
miracle when you look at the history of it. So I think if I think even in this current landscape, if Uncharted had been greenlit 2 years ago, I think we would be
yeah,
looking at a totally different movie, and a movie
yeah,
that I think would work better. So I have faith in adaptations coming forward. I think the first Uncharted movie is just caught in the fact that it's been in production
yeah.
for
For
15
so
years
long.
or some crazy shit like that.
Yeah, I think that yeah, it. I wish that movie tanked just because then maybe we would be 10 years away from a good adaptation of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I
But
get it.
I think it getting a sequel now means like okay, we're stuck with this for a bit, and it. I don't care if they get it back on track or not. It's just yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just another movie.
I
It's just
wish I
Yeah,
another
wish
movie.
movies could do the video game thing. That's one of the most unique things about video games. Video games are one of the only mediums in which the sequels are almost always better, right?
yeah,
Because you get to improve on things and you get to kind of figure out things that didn't work well the first time. Normally, like it's not the Uncharted. Even if Uncharted 2 is better than the first one, it's not going to be like, oh, it revolutionized the series.
yeah. It's still going to be that the series started with that first one. The series like they I'm trying not to use a gross like terminology with it. They took so much of what was earned later in the series and put it right up front.
Yeah,
Like picked and chose
Mm.
their favorite set pieces and the stuff with Sam and just even like learning about Nathan's backstory over time was a big thing before, right?
totally.
And
Yeah.
so kind of putting so much of that up front takes away the impact. Like before it was about peeling back the layers of Drake, and now it's just they cheapened it to this backstory to give you something to care about remotely starting off because they didn't do a good enough job like making you care otherwise.
Yeah,
That yeah, I don't. It would have to be wholly original stuff that I think they add to it to get it on track and make it interesting. I think.
for sure. Yeah, the beauty of the Uncharted games is that it has that pulp aspect to it. That every time you meet up with Drake again, things have happened in the background that they
Yeah.
don't necessarily explain, right? That you just kind of figure it out as you're going, and when Uncharted 3 starts and you're playing as like a young teenage Nathan
Child.
Drake in Colombia, right?
Yeah.
That's it's what Cam's saying. It's like earned. It feels like a cool moment that you're getting a little bit of backstory. But overall, I'm very excited for the future of video games adaptations. I think The
Yeah.
Last of Us it can be a really good catalyst for it done well, and I think the
Yeah.
Mario movie is the same thing. Uh, so yeah, that those are my thoughts on it. What about you guys? You guys have any closing thoughts?
Uh, I'll say I'm also excited to see what honestly, I'm excited for video game adaptations, yes. I'm excited that all the extra attention that games in general are gonna get because
Yeah.
Mm,
if The Last of Us creates a million new gamers, then that's like 50,000 of them that are going to find out what like an Undertale is or a Gone Home is. And that's really what I'm excited about. The more people we have playing games, then the more that even the smallest game is going to get more attention. So I'm excited to see how that looks like. And I'm also very impressed of two things that didn't happen during this conversation. Number one, we didn't say the word Uwe Boll until right now. I am so proud of that.
I thought of it. I thought
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure we all did, but thank God we didn't do that until now. And number two,
Bury it.
I didn't have to reveal that I still haven't watched the Nier Automata anime. For
I
Christ's sake,
fucking
so.
knew it, you
Oh.
son of a bitch. I was gonna read it. I was gonna talk about it when I saw the IGN list. I'm like, I bet this fucking guy hasn't seen an episode.
Yeah,
They're on
look,
break
every
right now,
time-
Emmett. They're on break because of
Oh,
because of
wait.
COVID. There was supposed to be an
Oh.
episode yesterday, and they didn't release it because they're animating it as they go. Apparently, watch
Holy
it.
crap.
I'm gonna catch up. I'm gonna catch up because my girlfriend's taking my hair out this week, so we will watch both episodes right
It's fucking so good, dude.
there. Hell yeah! Oh my god! Yeah, I'll have time. We always get distracted whenever she comes over, but we'll make time. We'll make time.
What about you, Cam?
Anyway.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I it's funny because like a month ago, shouldn't say that. 2 months ago, I would have been like, this isn't even a conversation to have. Like maybe then The Last of Us turns out well, but I have no faith in anything else. And then we got the Mario trailers, and then I still was like, well, Mario is like this wholly original thing. Like, who knows? But 2 weeks ago with like seeing The Last of Us, it's like, okay, no, that got me excited of like, that's the first time since I was a kid that I've seen something straight up adapted that I already was a fan of. And it's a feeling I forgot about.
Yeah.
Like, it was weird. It brought me back to like, now it's not a series I engage with, but like as a kid, I was into Harry Potter stuff, and it brought me back to that feeling of like a midnight release in like 2005, of just seeing what they're going to do, how this thing that I love is going to be brought to a new audience, have people that I know that I'm going to be able to discuss things with, and like it came back, and it was a weirdly almost, I was excited for something new, but also nostalgic for that feeling, and I think we're going to get more and more of that, and I think that's going to be cool because I don't read books enough to get that often, so it would be cool if we get some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. It feels like it's being done well. It feels like the original material is being appreciated for what it is. I think is the most important thing. It's not. I think before there was a sense of like, oh yeah, it's this game about fungus zombies. Go make a story about it. Whereas people are understanding that the source material is important and it is what it is for a reason, and it works
Yeah.
the way that it works, and people and creatives are understanding that and wanting to attach themselves to other versions of it, and I'm just excited about it. I agree with Cam that a couple months ago I probably wouldn't have felt this way, but just seeing how well it can be done and how well it is being done and how the right decisions are being made is just kind of this wave storm of good things happening within that medium. I think that the Phoebe Waller-Bridge one is one that just came out of left field and made me really hopeful of like, oh man, the proper people are attaching themselves to these projects. They're getting a lot of love by really smart, really creative people, and I'm excited. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Yep. We're on a wave of good news, so
100%, 100%. What shows
along.
and or movies do you want to see adapted from video games? Let us know in the comments below. What do you think of The Last of Us? Also, let us know in the comments below. Yell at Emmett for not watching the Nier Automata anime. In the
Look,
comments
I'm gonna
below.
do it. Next episode, if I haven't watched Nier Automata, you have permission to yell at me. But I also
Sweet.
said that about Stranger Paradise, and I didn't beat it by the end of the year, and no one has yelled at me, so thank you for that. But you have permission. It's fine.
I'm posting. I'm posting Emmett's address in the comments. Everybody, let's go beat the shit out of him, guys.
My old address is actually still on the internet. I tweeted it to Greg Miller like
Great.
oh my god.
You
So I moved from that house though, so
Good.
whatever. No one cares.
good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Cameron, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I don't think I've been on a podcast since 2021, and I don't get to talk to my friends about video games this much. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
No, we're
And also
happy
nice to
have
talk to you guys for the first
Oh,
time.
dude,
so,
right?
yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
listen, you're welcome on
Talking
the
to you
show.
as well.
You're welcome on the show anytime you want. Where Emmett and I we'll take you back again with open arms. Thanks so much for coming by.
Yeah, it would be fun in like a year even to look back on these projects maybe and
Ooh,
just see like
I like that.
what turned
I
out,
check
right?
in. I like a check in.
Call.
All right, everyone at home. We'll see you later.